Wow. Is that a Leica M6?
Actually, it's an M7. It's got the built-in light meter.
So beautiful. So sleek, so powerful. How's the new lens system?
Makes a Nikon look like a disposable.
You really know your cameras. And you're very cute.
Me? Really?
I'm going on break. I was going to step out back and have a cigarette. Would you like to join me?
I don't smoke.
Neither do I.
I've been living in New York City now for just over 2 years, and since I've started, I've just been a normal guy roaming the streets with a camera, but I always felt like there was this missing feeling, something nagging at me, that I just wasn't one of them. In the world of street photography, especially here in New York City, there's an unspoken rule that you're not really a street photographer unless you shoot with the Leica. Some people may think that it doesn't matter, or some Leica shooters may even say it doesn't matter what camera you shoot with, but I promise you, behind your back, every Leica shooter is talking about non-Leica shooters that they're not real photographers because they're not shooting with a Leica. After 2 years of kind of feeling left out, I finally bit the bullet and joined the Leica gang and got myself a Leica M4-P. It's kind of like being handed the keys to a secret club. I feel like when I use this camera, photographers nod at me, I have more respect, my aura is just different. Coffee tastes better, beanies fit a little better, birds chirp louder, and in general, it's been a great experience. Life has been so much better since I got my M4-P. And today I'm going to talk to you about what it's like joining the cult of Leica. It's not really about the camera, it's more so about the mystique, about the attitude, and kind of like pretending you know more about photography than you actually do. Welcome to my very official, very unbiased review of the Leica M4-P. Let's dive in.
No can do. Spent the last 4 years tutoring lacrosse players just to pay for it. So nobody touches my camera but me.
So it's like your wiener.
No, it's not like getting...
So obviously that was all a joke, but I did buy a Leica M4-P, and so in this video I'm going to talk a bit about it. I've had it now for pretty much about 2 months or something like that. But yeah, I'm going to just kind of run through my positives and my negatives, who I think this camera is for, if you don't already know the answer to that, and also just kind of the general feeling I have about this camera. But before I get into that, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I really am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of this year. Now that I'm trying to post back on YouTube consistently, we'll see how I do. But we're very close to 1,000, so I would love if you could help me get there. Thanks. All right, so before I jump into what I like about this camera, and kind of what it does for me and the positives and all the great things I have to say about this camera, and there's also going to be negatives after that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the M4-P for those who don't know much about it, and I'm also going to talk about this specific model, which is the 70th anniversary edition M4-P in silver chrome. And so for this part, I'm gonna have some notes here on my laptop to my right, so I'm gonna read just kind of off of that. So please, I'm sorry for the lack of eye contact. So I'm gonna just talk about what I wrote down. It's often said that the M4-P is pretty much an M6 without a light meter. There's truth to that, meaning that the body style, the advanced lever, rewind knob, the film counter, frame lines, it's all very similar to the M6. It just doesn't have a rangefinder. The M4-P was an evolution of the M4, which was released in 1967. The M4-P incorporated improvements from its predecessors like the M3 and the M2, while introducing new features that cater to contemporary photographers. So one of those key updates is a 28mm frame lines and the 75mm frame line option. One of the main reasons why I decided to go with the M4-P over like an M4 or even like an M3 or M4 II is I wanted the 28mm frame lines because I'm shooting on 28mm most of the time. So there's a few different models of the M4-P made, and I'm gonna link down below a Reddit post of somebody, a collector, kind of talking through the different models, and so a lot of this information came from there. So that is my source. The production run total for the M4-P was 24,970 cameras from 1980 to 1986. It is said that 85% of those models were black chrome, so the silver chrome models are much more rare. This model here is part of a limited run during that time that celebrated Leica's 70th anniversary. There were 2,500 silver chrome 70th anniversary edition Leicas. The one I have here is 1,023. And so if you ever see in the wild a silver chrome M4-P that is not a part of that 70th anniversary edition run, that is even more rare than the 70th anniversary edition silver M4-P. And not that it matters, the rarity of these cameras. I know to some people it matters. I will say part of the reason I bought this camera over a black one, because I did want the black one originally, is, and I'll get into it a little bit later, is I did actually like the idea of having like a special edition or more limited, you know, Leica. I think the idea of that is cool. I think in my heart, like, I am a collector. I enjoy collecting things. I like limited edition stuff. And so, you know, it was no different when it came to this purchase. So yeah, I've known for pretty much about a year now that, you know, I knew eventually I was going to buy a Leica, especially being here in New York. You know, I'm just surrounded by so many Leicas all the time, and I'm just here for the past like year and a half with my like Ricoh KR5 shitty SLR camera, which isn't shitty. I absolutely love that camera, and created great work with it, and it doesn't matter what camera you use. But there is that feeling of like, damn, you know, I wish I could also be a part of like a gang. And so when I decided that I wanted to start looking at Leicas, pretty much the one I landed on was the M4-P, and the main reasons why were 28mm frame lines, similar to the M6. I don't necessarily need a light meter, and I like the styling of it, you know, if that matters to you or not. But really the main reason was price. It is a little bit more affordable than the M6. You could definitely find some M6s that are older and maybe not as taken care of in the M4-P range, but the top end of the M4-P range is just in better condition than like the lower end of the M6 range, and that's just anecdotal. I don't 100% know if that's necessarily true, but in my sort of shopping and research, that's kind of what I found. Obviously the newer M6s are much more expensive. And so when I was looking, KH had a few options and I didn't pull the trigger. They got sold. MPB had a few options. But they were kind of lower end of the like user quality scale. Like they weren't taken care of at all, and they were like, their leather was coming off. I'm sure they weren't CLA'd and all of that. I went to the new Leica store in the meatpacking district, and they didn't have any, and they even checked all the flagship Leica stores, and there was like no M4-Ps like in their system at all. And so I didn't want to go the eBay route either. I was kind of looking at private sellers, but couldn't really find anything, so I was kind of like out of luck. But then I ended up asking my buddy who worked at the Leica store in Soho, the older one, which I'm pretty sure is closed now, but they ended up having a M4-P, which was this camera. And he told me like, hey, it's silver chrome. I know you want the black, but come check it out anyways. It's in really good condition. I checked it out, and then I realized it's like sort of special edition. I did research, you know, about all the stuff I just told you, and I was like, damn, it's actually in really great condition. They just, when they bought it, they got a CLA'd from DGA, I believe is the company that CLA'd it, which later on in the video I'll tell you about it, but I had to actually send it back to them because there was a problem with it when I got it, and so that was a little bit annoying, but I'll get into that later. And so that's whatever. And then I just kind of decided to pull the trigger on this specific camera for those reasons, and here we are now. Here we are now. The lenses that I'm rocking with, I picked up the Voigtlander Ultron f2 28mm. This is, I think there's like an older version of this lens. This is the newer version. I got it used at B&H for a really solid price. And then I also have the 35mm Nocton, I think, which is like a 1.4 35mm, which I haven't seen any of my scans back from that camera yet. I just scanned them, but I haven't like, you know, edited them or anything like that. So I'm excited to see how those come out. And yeah, that is how I ended up with this camera and been loving it so far. So now we're just gonna jump into the positives about this camera and what I like about this camera. And after that, we'll talk about the negatives. So it's been a couple of months, like I said. I've shot maybe like 35 rolls in like the last 2 months on this camera or something. Maybe that's a little bit high, but I definitely haven't seen all those rolls. I'm still like super backed up on editing. I just finished scanning recent stuff today. And I'm like super backed up, but I have seen a lot of work. You know, I've minimum have seen at least like 15 rolls from this camera, probably a little bit more. But anyways, I've shot a lot of rolls through this camera so far in the last 2 months. And honestly, the way this camera handles that's probably like the biggest benefit or positive to this camera, to the M4-P, and I'm sure the M6s are the same way. I've held an M6, but I've never like shot on an M6. Same thing with the digital Leicas, like I've held them and whatnot, but I haven't like really shot with them. So I'm going to talk specifically about the M4-P, but you know, if you want to compare it to some of the other Leica M's, I'm sure you kind of can. The way this camera handles is absolutely incredible, especially coming from before this. I was shooting with the Ricoh KR5 Super, which is just a, you know, old plasticky, but it's still great SLR 35mm camera. This camera just handles much better. And just kind of shooting with the rangefinder in general, I understand now why so many street photographers enjoy it. When I had to send this back in to get repaired, it was just a few days I was without it, and I was shooting on my Ricoh KR5 Super. And I just like didn't enjoy it as much, knowing like how good this is compared to that in terms of like the way it feels and I'm shooting on the street. It's like so difficult to explain what that means. It really is just such a good feeling to use on the street. I kind of just compare it to like driving a really good manual sports car that's fully manual. I used to drive a Subaru BRZ that was just like, it was tuned perfectly and the transmission was awesome and it was balanced perfectly. And sure, maybe it was a little bit slow, but that didn't matter. Like the driving experience was so perfect on that car. It's kind of like the photography experience with this camera is like really almost perfect. Another big benefit, especially coming from my SLR before, is how silent the shutter is, and I'm pretty sure that's like common amongst rangefinders in general because there isn't a mirror that is slapping up and down. But my SLR that I shot with was so loud, and even though it was kind of satisfying, the amount of times, like almost every time if I was close to a subject, it was very difficult for me to work a scene after taking one photo because I was disrupting the scene, and I didn't necessarily care about I guess, confrontation of them knowing I took their photo or anything like that. Like I didn't care about that, but what I did care about is like if I see a subject doing something, you know, I want to like just kind of quickly take the photo to capture that moment, and then I want to work the scene to then compose that moment. When you have a loud SLR, it's really difficult to do that when you take the camera. I mean, you take the photo and everybody around you immediately looks at the camera because everyone hears it. With this, it's so quiet, you know, that's just not an issue, which I absolutely just love and appreciate. Another really big benefit with, I guess, rangefinders is critical focusing is much better than I thought it was going to be. Already with my SLR, I was zone focusing quite a bit, or range focusing, whatever you want to call it. I was using the distance scale of the lens to just kind of shoot, you know, without critical focusing. It's definitely easier to do that with a rangefinder lens. I feel like the sort of scale or distance scale, whatever, seems a little bit greater, which is great. For the most part, I'm shooting this at like f11, f16, and I like barely have to focus, which is awesome. But when I do critical focus for like the 10-50% of the time I do, it is just like so much easier for me to kind of line up, you know, line up the focus patch to hit focus compared to the SLR focusing system on the KR5. You know, that's personal preference, but for me, it is like a huge, huge benefit. Another benefit, another positive, I think loading film on the, like the way the bottom loading Leica M, like the way you load film with this, I think is really easy. And I really enjoy it. And I like I'm able to get like 38 frames out of my 36 exposure roll, which is awesome. And another positive, which might be a hot take, I feel, but I kind of love the attention that this camera grabs. And I don't even necessarily mean from other photographers who know what a Leica is. And I actually think maybe on that side, it's more of a negative. And I don't like, especially for like people not in this community who are used to seeing Leicas. I went to Atlanta for an event, and the photographers there were kind of like, oh, like a Leica. Like there was a certain like negative connotation there, which maybe isn't the best. I mean, I really don't care, but I can see that being a negative thing to some people. But one thing I do like is I get so many compliments from people who don't know about photography and don't know about cameras and don't know what Leica is, just because it is such a pretty camera. The amount of people, random people who have just thought to me like, wow, like, is that a vintage camera? Or, oh, wow, is that a film camera? Is that like this camera? Like, it looks really cool. And I get like a lot of like positive interactions because of this camera. It's just like a really good conversation starter, which to some people, maybe they don't like that attention. To me, I enjoy the conversation starting, and I like, you know, just talking to random people. And if this is a intro to those conversations, and I'm super happy with that. But it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Some of the negatives that I have with this camera is, number one, it's like surprisingly really heavy. I don't know why, like my assumption before getting this camera, even though I've held M6s and I've held Leicas before, but like it's like I didn't, like obviously since I wasn't holding them for long periods of time on a daily basis, I kind of didn't realize. But it is heavier than I thought it was gonna be, especially coming from the KR5, which was all plastic for the most part. That's obviously really light. This is obviously all metal for the most part, and so it's obviously really heavy, which is a good thing, and that means it's hopefully gonna last long. It's really robust, and it's built, and like it like handles really well because it is so heavy and it's so dense, kind of. It's like a brick, which I appreciate. But when it comes to like shooting for like long periods of time, when I'm going on like my full day photo walks for like 6 hours, like, you know, 30,000 steps, 40,000 steps, like it is a heavy camera. So after a while I do have to, like, you know, put the strap around my wrist and just let it hang, or let it hang on my neck or my shoulder, and kind of take a break from holding it like in my hand all the time. To add to that, I also think like the lack of, I understand like there not being a grip here, but the lack of a grip, and my Ricoh KR5 didn't have that either. And I didn't mind it because it was so light, but since this camera, excuse me, since this camera is heavier, I kind of do wish there was like a little bit of a hand grip here. And I know they sell like those half leather cases that do have those hand grips, so maybe in the future I'll look into that. But those are just like two minor things when it comes to like the comfort of like shooting with this camera for long periods of time I find annoying. The other thing is I wear glasses all the time, especially when I'm out shooting. I want to be able to see the world around me, and I don't wear contacts. It's impossible for me to kind of see the 28mm frame lines without doing this and moving my head around. So most of the time I don't mind it because I kind of know what 28mm looks like. I look through the rangefinder, but for the most part, like I don't necessarily need to like critically compose my image, but there's still times that I want to do that. So when I do want to do that, just to make sure there's like something, if there's something I want to like include or not include in my frame, or I'm trying to maybe line up like, you know, horizontals or something. When I want to do that and I have my glasses on, I really do have to move my head around the frame and, you know, just make sure everything's in check. Even at 35mm, which I'll just go ahead and switch now. Like I kind of still have to do the same thing. I can't just put my eye to the viewfinder. If I take my glasses off and if I use my left eye, then I can finally see the entire 28mm, you know, frame lines. Same thing with my right eye, but my right eye is my bad eye. So it is a little bit more difficult, but that's just something to keep in mind. Maybe eventually I'll buy like an external viewfinder, but I don't necessarily think that's necessary. But you know, it's just a minor gripe I have with it. And those are like the main complaints I really have with this camera. The other thing, the reason I had to send the camera back in for repair is when I got my first few rolls back, I was shooting at Coney Island and I've been following Sunny 16. And for the most part, I was either at like f11 at 500th of a second or 16 at 1,000th of a second. And pretty much at 500 and 1,000th of a second, what I was noticing in the sky specifically, there was these black lines, like underexposed lines going across my frame, like horizontally. And I thought maybe it was a developer issue or like a scan issue or something like that. So I went to a new lab, same issue, went to another one, same issue. So then I went back to the store I bought it from, and thankfully, you know, they got it CLA'd from DGA when they bought the camera. Pretty sure it was still under warranty, and they took care of it for me, sent it back to DAG or DGA, whatever the company is called, and he repaired it. It ended up being like the shutter curtain, the metal part that kind of leads the curtain, was dirty, or there was some debris, and so at high shutter speeds, when the curtain got really tight, it would kind of just underexpose the image as, like, you know, when it got exposed. And so that's fixed now, hopefully. I actually haven't seen, since I got it back, I haven't seen any of my rolls, I'm pretty sure, and so it could still be broken, but I think it should be fine. But those are the only negatives I have to say about the camera. For the most part though, like, again, the experience of it has been awesome, and yeah, I absolutely love it. So yeah, say what you will about Leica as a brand or company. I kind of don't really care. What I do care about is enjoying the camera that I'm using, and you know, I enjoyed the $50 camera I was using before. I'm enjoying this camera that I'm using now. but I'm really enjoying using this camera. And so with that being said, you know, I'm overall really happy with this purchase. And I guess I can answer the question I like to answer whenever I do reviews is like, who do I think this camera is for? And honestly, this camera is probably for people like me who don't want to spend M6 money and don't care to have a light meter. This is probably a good option for you. There's obviously other options that you can get for cheaper, but I think this camera has a lot of benefits in the way it was constructed. And even though it was made in Canada, which some people don't like that it was made in Canada, which is dumb, but for the most part, these have really solid construction. If you look online, like they're really durable, really reliable, as reliable as M6s and whatnot. So I think if you're like looking for like a mid-range budget film Leica camera, this is a good option for you. Do I think everybody needs a Leica? Of course not. I think it's stupid that that's like even a conversation. And I like gear talk because I like gear and I enjoy talking about gear. And I am also someone who's like very sentimental when it comes to gear. This is a camera I'm planning on having for the rest of my life. Like I want to take care of it that way. Like I would love to pass on this camera to my kids and whatnot. And I'm sure along the years, I'm going to buy other cameras and I'll buy other Leicas and I'll buy better Leicas. Maybe I'll get an M6 or an MP or whatever, an MA. But yeah, I enjoy gear talk, but I also think that, you know, I understand why people don't like the Leica talk. But at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters. Just do what you want to do and shoot what you want to shoot. And if you're thinking about buying one of these cameras, I can't recommend it enough. I think they look awesome as well. I love the way the silver chrome has really grown on me. Originally I did want black, but I'm really happy I got the silver chrome. But the black ones are still beautiful as well. But yeah, I'm gonna conclude the video here. If there's anything you want me to answer about this camera in coming videos, let me know. I have a few videos planned. I just started film scanning, so I think eventually I'm gonna make a video about like my process now at the beginning, and then maybe like a year from now do like an updated process video or something like that. Then I'm also going to film a video about the X-H2S, which I'm filming with now, and kind of why I got rid of the R6. And I have a few other videos planned that are more like abstract-y and not so much gear talk or whatever, but hopefully I can start posting consistently again. We'll see. But don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and leave a like. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
What are you gonna do? I'm going to Rome. I'll walk or I'll hitchhike. I'll swim if I have to, but I'm gonna get to meet you somehow. Maybe that'll help. Where'd you get all that?
Wait, where's your Leica?